And so our hope is that we can help the families that they work with build resilient families over time. And what are the things that help families be resilient? The simple way to look at this is you have protective factors and risk factors. And if you have more protective factors than you have risk factors, then you're going to be able to overcome the risk factors. And so the simple equation to me is increase protective factors, decrease risk factors. It's just that simple.
Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, presented by Minky Couture. This is a weekly podcast where people share real-life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best lives. I'm Jennie Taylor.
And I'm Michelle Scharf. Minky Couture, oh my gosh, their blankets are the pinnacle in luxury, softness, and warmth and coziness, just in time for fall. Be sure to check them out at one of their 6 locations across the Wasatch Front, minkycouture.com. We love our Minkies.
We absolutely do. And Michelle, today's going to be a great day. We're back in studio. We've got an amazing and inspiring guest on the line that's going to help us with something that matters to all of us, which is family life.
I love it. He is going to be a keynote speaker for our R.E.A.L Connections event that we have coming up. We'll help you check that out at relentlesslyresilient.com. Dr. Joseph White is a PhD in Human Development and Family Studies, and he's the Executive Director of Foundation for Family Life. And Joseph, before we got talking, you said that your best title is what?
Husband, father, and grandfather.
I love that. I love that. Those are the most important work that we do in this world, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your foundation and the work that you're doing.
So I was in academia for a decade or so. I taught at South Dakota State University and then University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and ended up leaving academia and came out to Utah to work in the private sector and doing research and evaluation for a guy out of Taylorsville. Then he retired, and I decided to go on and I felt very strongly about doing my own thing. And so that's when I started the Foundation for Family Life. And it's just been an interesting journey along the way. I've felt really driven by the work that I've done, the research I've been able to do, and the knowledge that our field has gained over the last 4 or 5 decades or more of what makes healthy families.
What does make a healthy family? Let us in on the secret.
It's a secret, yeah. And it's only available for $19.99.
Hey, if it were only $19.99, we'd all be paying it right now.
Yeah,
that's
kidding.
Right. Well, there's a lot of tools, and with our family life coaching program that we've developed over the years, it's really an accumulation of the tools that have come out of the family studies field primarily. And so hopefully we have a few minutes to talk about a few of those things. And I don't want to bore you with all this academic jargon and stuff, but I just did want to hopefully share a few of those tools that do help contribute to healthy, strong families. So that's kind of what the family life coaching program is all about.
I would love to hear about that. You know, I am not in academia. I do not have a degree. However, I have spent my life, I actually started out in child development. And I started a daycare and a preschool early on I was 18 years old, read all of these books from the colleges and worked with a woman who had her own preschool and daycare. And she mentored me through that process. So that began my very beginnings of early childhood development understanding. And also I was 18, I was young. And so I was just coming out of a home that was not healthy and moving into married life, which presents all kinds of challenges. And looking back over my experiences and my lifetime, I will say, and you can set me straight if I'm wrong, I would say I've learned a couple things. One, we parent from our unmet personal needs. So whatever needs we didn't have as a child, we tend to try to compensate for those needs in our children, which may be completely unnecessary because our children are individuals and come with their own set of challenges and needs. And sometimes we miss those in our efforts to kind of reparent ourselves through our parenting of our children. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. it's a process, and we all
Right.
want to grow and do a better job than our parents did. Some people grow up with great parents and don't have that issue, but
Right.
you
Yeah. So
also have
that has been my observation. And like I said, I didn't go through, I'm well read and I've done a lot of self work, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just thought, man, I really wish I could reparent my children because I missed the boat. But we all do our best, right? I did better than what my parents did, and hopefully my children are going to do better than I did. But are there tools available that we don't just do slightly better, that we actually start seeing our children for the individuals that they are and be able to really build healthy, strong families?
wow, that is a great question. And I really do believe there are tools, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that if we look at a couple of I think some simple ones, even without going through the whole family life coaching program, there's some basic things you can look at. And your question about looking at our children differently, one of the really stark contrasts that stuck out to me when I first started studying this area was this. Dana Baumrein did some work back in the 70s and identified kids that came up doing better, and they actually looked better later on, and figured out what it was. And she looked at the parents, and so she was able to come up with these different parenting styles, and she's really the most famous one for the parenting styles that have evolved. And essentially there's 4 different parenting styles, and the one that is the most ideal is called authoritative or democratic. It's like you're firm and provide a structure and guidance for your children, but you also have a high level of love and compassion and caring for them. The other ones that are not so good are more of like, I grew up with a more of an authoritarian type of parenting. Like, I'm a Navy brat, so my dad was very militaristic, right? And so there's that sort of high level of structure and demandingness, but low level of love and support.
Mm.
And there's also the other two, which are more permissive, and they're not as engaged with the child. You're not as providing much structure in their life. It's like, okay, whatever you want to do, and we still love you. And they may have high love, but there's no structure, or there may be low love and no structure. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's permissive indifferent and permissive indulgent. So those really can create some difficult outcomes for children because they don't have that guidance. And children really want guidance. I think that children really
Mm-hmm.
want to have that structure and support in their lives because they don't know. And so the parent is there, and the role of the parent is not to be their best friend, but the role of the parent is to be there and to love them and support them and guide them, but with the boundaries and structure that they need to
Mm-hmm.
help them move on to make those decisions in their lives and to become. I think it was you, Michelle, that asked the question about how do you see them differently? Was that right? Was it your
Mm-hmm.
question?
Well,
And I
how
think if you
to
can,
see them as individuals, each as their
right,
own unique people.
right. And if you see them, if you adapt that approach of parenting where you see yourself as a guide for these children, that you're there to love and support them and also to provide the foundation, the structure, and the guidance that they need, I think that helps you to look at them different and treat them as a unique, precious individual that they are, rather than someone for you to demand and dictate and tell what to do. And you know old school, children to be seen, not heard, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
the past has been. And I think there's a lot of people that have come through that generational trauma they talk about. I think as you work through it, and I love what you said, that you hope that your children are better than you were. That's the goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Each you
Right.
get better with your children.
Okay,
So,
I love that. Can we say those 4 again? This is what I've written down. So you said the first was authoritative, authoritarian,
yes,
permissive indulgent, and permissive indifferent. And it looks like it's kind of a matrix where you've got kind of the components of structure being high and low, and love and support being high and low. So of course you want the high structure with the high love and support, as opposed to a mix match of high or low, or even high and low of the others. Does that
that's
kind of sum it
well
up?
said.
I drew myself a
Well
little
said.
box.
That's amazing. I'm so impressed. That's
Well, we
exactly
do.
what we do.
I mean, permissive, we sometimes, I know I'm sometimes guilty of you give in. They're persuasive, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, there's a lot going on. They give you but everyone gets to, or all my friends have access to, or ... And
Right.
forgetting that the kids crave the structure and some expectations and some limits, as long as it's backed with that love and support and not only limits and restrictions and expectations. I really appreciate that.
Thanks. And give yourself some grace too, right? We all are going to be in those different categories at different times in our parenting experience and our parenting journey. And it's just part of the process of life. But the hope is that we spend more of our time in that authoritative role, that guiding and loving and structuring supportive role.
Yeah, I would definitely say I've moved through all of these boxes.
There have been times when...
And I would say that for the most part, there was a high degree of love behind all of it. Sometimes it did get mixed in with a high degree of frustration and exhaustion and giving up, kind of the white flag.
Yeah.
Like that's part of life,
we've all been there.
Right.
We've all been there.
Right. And although I was raised personally in an authoritarian home, and I would say, I think that they believed that they highly loved all of their children. I did not feel that as a child. And I struggled with it because, as you know, we're trying to do better, right? So I didn't want to raise my children that way because I'm a very free-spirited child. And my dad would tell you, I mean, if he was sitting here in the room, he'd say, oh, she was a problem child and I tried to beat it out of her. He's very proud of that fact. He would say, I tried to break her. In fact, when he handed me off to my husband, he said, I tried to break her. Good luck with this one. She's yours now.
So that perspective was really how he viewed it.
Yeah. So, and it's okay. I appreciate the sorry, but I've really healed too much. Yeah, it's okay. And I've really healed through this and I've really done the work. But what I wanted to say about it is it's really hard when you're trying to step out of what you've been raised in to sometimes when you get really tired to not move it back into what you've been taught, right?
Or what you're used to.
So I think that there were moments that I can look back honestly and say, I moved into that authoritarian box where like, this is the role, you're going to do it, and that's it. But it didn't really, it was authoritarian. It wasn't authoritative. And I think that we tend to do that when we lose our set of tools, right? When we exhaust what we know or we're being challenged consistently and we've been worn down, then we kind of step back into that, I don't have any other resources, so you go back to what you've been taught or know, right?
Yeah, I call that your default functioning. It's what you were raised with.
Thank you.
It's just what you know.
Yeah, thank you. I needed a word for that. The default
and another
functioning.
Word for what you said earlier. You mentioned how even though your parents felt like they loved you, and they did, I'm sure. But there's this concept of symbolic interactionism. But the gist of it is that your perception is your reality.
Right.
So whether or not
my husband said that all the time.
With love,
all the time.
Your perception is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that
you act based on that, on your reality.
And so maybe we can talk about that. So how do we do that? Because I'll admit that's where sometimes I struggle. And Michelle, I appreciated that you can see or try to see that from your father's point of view, he was acting with love. Mm-hmm. It came out differently, or maybe not what we would encourage in today's child raising world. But I'll admit I'll see things where I know what my intent was, and I can tell something really got lost in translation with my kid because their perception does not match what I think is reality.
Right.
In which case it's not reality.
Right.
Right. And so I love the box. I love the 4. I love that we want to be loving and supportive while also giving limits and structure and support. How? Get some guidelines for us? Like I would gladly pay $19.99 a month over and over again for the rest of my life if you could help me with some of the hows.
Yeah. Like how do we step out of that default function?
Oh my gosh, that's the question of a lifetime for me. That's been my whole journey, is to try to find ways. And for Alice, my wife, and we have had so many nights where we would stay up late into the night talking about, it really was with our older children. And then we kind of figured it out a little later on. But so we also call in the family life, there's a one theory called the family life cycle. And, they call your oldest child the pilot child because they're the ones you experiment on.
Right. Poor kid.
So we talked so much about them and different parenting things and experiences. And then the second one was totally different. They all have different personalities. And like you said earlier, see them as a unique individual and what their needs are. And so for some children, a timeout may work great. For others, it's not. So but I think that perception, understanding that your perception becomes your reality, if you can remember that, then you can recognize as you work with your children that your goal is to treat them with love and kindness and but yet firmness, and let them know, these are the consequences. Let them know ahead of time, here's the consequences. And then if they choose to do something, remind them that that's the consequence that they chose to do, and not turn it into a nag session or a guilt session, and trying to get away from the guilt and shame based parenting. Oh my gosh, that makes such a huge difference. But the perception, right? If you can help them remember and show them that you love them and care about them, not try to be overly effusive, but just do it in your natural way of who you are. I think it does change over time. So I mean, I don't know. It's been the journey of a lifetime for me to try to not go back to that immediate, dictatorial, demanding, and fairly abusive style. But a lot of it has come through my wife too, and talking with her and talking through things, and she's been very great and helpful and patient and loving, and she'll take things on that I'm not able to do at a time with a certain child, and it's been such a blessing, such a journey.
And that's the joy of having two parents in a home, right? Like, because that's the ideal. You kind of have.
But then what do you do if you don't have two parents?
Right, exactly. Like now,
and too many of us don't. I mean, I just started to laugh when you said that, because this is where, my husband died almost 6 years ago, and I hate the idea of remarriage because I just personally don't like it. But in the last couple of weeks, couple of years, couple of months, like there's more and more going on in the world around me where I think, I know it's better for a child to have two parents in the home. What do you do when you don't? And I don't know that it's necessarily always better to just go pick some new husband to come be an Insta-dad, right?
100% it's not.
So I run into that in my mind where it's like, okay, my children would probably benefit from
the reality
a father
is
figure. What do you do? What do you do when you don't?
The reality is a second husband is more of a risk to your child's well-being and actual staying alive than they are to be necessarily
So
be
what
helpful.
do I do as a widow, a divorcee, maybe a parent that's fled an abusive or toxic situation, maybe a parent that's in a situation the second parent was never even around?
Right.
I know what the ideal is, and I love the ideal, and I preach it, read it, study it, believe it. What advice do you have for those of us who maybe are not in that loving, nurturing partnership in the home where two parents are there to help, if nothing else, back each other up when it is hard and frustrating and exhausting to try to be for the children what you are or what you want to be?
Yeah.
Right. So, I love our family studies field because there's some great research that has been done in different areas, and one of them is in single parenthood. And there's also, by the way, some really good research that's looked at remarriage, second marriage, and so forth. And Larry Lawrence and Marilyn Ganong, there's a lot of great studies out there. So you can find some skills and tools to work through, even if you're going through a second marriage. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I was in 3 different foster homes as a kid, and my second foster home was a remarried couple, and they had 4 kids each. And I learned so much from them. And in the first couple of years of our marriage, I reflected back on their relationship. And so it was rather than the abusive and destructive relationship that my parents had. So I'm so grateful for that. And what I learned from that was incredible. I think it helped save our marriage in a lot of ways, because I saw the joy and the happiness that they had by joking around and teasing with each other, but then knowing when to end it and not to carry it out of control, right? But I think as a single parent, whatever situation you're in now, I'm sure and confident that there's groups out there that you can visit with, but also maybe you have a parent or some good friends that you can talk through and share your struggles and your experiences with your children they can sort of be a listening ear, right? And I think in a lot of ways too, that's where our family life coaching can come in. You can have a family life coach not a life coach. I don't want to dismiss life. I think life coaches can be great, or business coaches, whatever, but a family life coach is somebody that's really trained and has the ability, has life experience and the ability to kind of walk through these things and struggles that you're having, and helping you to set goals for the future and work through things as well that you want to do differently as a parent. So I don't know, what have you done, Jennie, as you've gone through this challenge? Would you say it's been 6 or so years or so?
I don't know that I'm the poster child for any of this. I can tell you what I've tried to do. I can tell you where I failed. I mean, I can tell you where I can see, man, I wish I could do that differently. I also grew up in a single parent home. My dad died when I was a kid. And I'll admit, when my mom got remarried, I was happy for her, very happy for her, and kind of hated it. Hated this new guy around. Didn't need a new dad. I had a dad. He was just dead, but I still had one. So there was that teenage, which I'll admit probably carries over into my thinking as a 44-year-old, somewhat grown woman. I think one of the things I've tried to do with my kids is provide that love and support to let them know that I love them in their choices, even if I don't love their choices. And sometimes that's hard because I am by nature a very old-fashioned, set in my ways. I like black and white and no gray in the middle. And so that's something, maybe what have I done as a parent is learn to just chill out a little. Because we joke all the time. One time my boys, probably, 13 and 15, were sitting at the table, were telling me how strict I was. I was so strict, and nobody else's parents are so strict, and I'm the strictest parent on the planet. I just kind of lost it at them. And I got out a piece of paper and I made a list. I said, let me tell you what strict parenting would look like if I were in charge. The me that never had a baby that thought I knew how I was going to raise my kids, and I wouldn't do this, and I would only do that, and I would require this and insist on that and never be okay with. And I made a list of silly things, video games, sleepovers, soda, sugar, just all the things you think you're going to have this ideal structured parenting parameter. And I showed him the list. I said, you tell me where I've won on any of these, because I've probably lost on all of them. And so if anything, I think I've had to learn to chill out a little and respect my children as people, making their own choices, trying to make sure they know I love them, even if I don't love a choice they made. And right now, I'll tell you what we're navigating, and I'd love maybe even offline any references or studies you have or things I can look into, navigating not only the parenting situation in the midst of an absent or deceased parent, but what does that extended family look like? What type of relationship can I help my children foster with the aunts and uncles from the deceased parent or the grandparents? Do I get in the way if I try to promote that? Is it my obligation to try and promote that? Do we pit kids against each other if we promote that? We have a lot of extended family dynamics happening in our home right now and beyond, to where I'll find myself thinking, I don't know. I don't know nearly as much as I thought I knew a decade ago. Certainly don't know what I thought I knew 5 years ago when Brent was still here, or 6 years ago. And so I find myself trying to be more open with my kids and asking them, what would support look like for you? Rather than me thinking I know what it is. Or, if they have a game, do you want me to come to the game? Do you want me to let you drive with your friends to the game? Do you want to host the homecoming dance at our house, or do you want me to kind of step out of it? And instead of thinking I know how they perceive me, I think I've just gotten a little more surrendered and white flag to say, okay, you tell me how you perceive me, and then maybe let's go from there. But I'll admit we're in a spot. I would say this last year has probably been a bunch of a roller coaster of trying to figure it out as my younger kids become bigger. My little babies are no longer babies. They're old enough to have questions and ask and be aware of things. So I'm looking for anything and everything you've referenced here to say, how do we do this and how does it work? Because I'm not sure I consider myself one that really knows, other than where I've messed it up, which is kind of depressing and discouraging. So anyway.
Oh my gosh, it sounds beautiful. Are you kidding me? I think that what you've shared sounds like an awesome approach to parenting. You're asking them, what do you think? What do you want? What would you prefer? And it's not that you're giving up. It doesn't sound to me like a white flag. A white flag would be, well, go figure it out. Good luck. If I show up, then it's, a bonus. But it sounds to me like you're still an engaged and involved parent, and you have shared your love with them. An interesting question too about how do you handle your deceased parents, the in-laws, right? And I don't know. I mean, is that something that maybe you turn over to your children as well as they get older? But I don't know. Do you encourage it? Is that a healthy dynamic? I guess there's some questions you can ask, because you have a stewardship, right, with their father's parents as well, their father's family. Is there a stewardship that you have a responsibility with there that you can help to bless and grow? Are those good relationships that will help them in their life?
I like the word stewardship over obligation. Thank you. That helps me, because I'll admit I get stuck a lot. Where I struggle as a parent is with the word should. I think I should do this, or I should have done that, or I should have not done or said. And it's a really dangerous trap to get into. It's good to read all the advice and get all the input from the studies, the book, your mother, your friend, your neighbor. But Thank you. I can look at that stewardship. And it's interesting you mentioned turning it over to my children, because just this last week or two, my oldest son said, "Hey, Mom, I think we need to invite Dad's family over like once a month for a game night." And I thought, okay, that may or may not have been something I tried to do and struggled to do in the past, but it's his initiative. Okay, we're going to make this happen. We're going to, if that's the route he wants to take, I'm not going to force it, because sometimes I also wonder that you can't force a relationship with a teenager, especially. But
Right.
now it's
Well, you can certainly
now it's his
empower
idea.
it.
Yes,
You can empower that.
and I
that
can order
decision.
pizza with the best of them, because I'm a terrible cook, but that's okay.
I'm going to give you some lessons. I'm tired of hearing you give that excuse. Come over and help you
No,
cook.
it's not so much that I'm a terrible cook as we've got ourselves too busy. We're too busy I got to cut some things out, because it'll come down to that more than anything. I can stress over cleaning the house and baking a perfect meal, or hey, let's tidy up and order some pizza.
You know, I think that was the hardest thing. I went to work when my children were in their teens, and I had a son that was getting ready to leave high school, and I went to work full time, and it was all consuming. And those 3 or 4 years I can't get back, and they were pinnacle for all of my kids. And I think that that's the hard thing, is that sometimes being able to give our kids the gift of time, whether that means we're just actually sitting at home and waiting for them to come through the door. We may be sitting there hours while they're out doing whatever, but it's that moment that they walk in the door and need us, that we're there. And you can't go back and you can't recapture that time or those pinnacle moments. And that's the hard part of parenting, I think.
I think so too. I feel like in a
Those
way,
are
I feel
priceless
like
moments.
I blurred 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Since
I
parenting. It's
really
been a
regret.
blur. It's been a blur.
I regret working in it. At the same time, I see why things happen the way they did in light of my husband dying. And I'm like, that was a tender mercy that I was able to find work and be able to do those things. It was both, right? I see it cost my kids something, but I also see that I was able to provide and not be in panic when he died.
Sure.
So
Beautiful.
anyway, those
Look,
things
we're all
are
on the
challenging.
journey in our lives, and we're all growing and going through things. And one of the great things that happened for me early on in my young adult years was I came across this phrase, and I hope that you guys can appreciate this. It sounds a little crass, but it's not. If you really think about it, you use the word should. And I mentioned earlier about trying to get out of this guilt and shame based parent. We want to get out of guilt and shame based thinking for ourselves as well. But it's this phrase, "Thou shalt not should on thyself."
Just going to put it on a Post-it note on my bathroom mirror.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not should on thyself. And if you remember that, shoulding, you beat yourself up all the time with should, coulda, woulda, shoulda, and it just goes nowhere. It doesn't help you. So where we are
Shoulding.
today,
I love it.
where are we
Shoulding.
going?
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of like in my sharing about, I can see both sides of how working cost my kids. And I kind of have some regret about that, but also I see the benefits. And I love that you said we're all on this journey, right? There was some divine intervention in having that work and having what I had now that I've lost my husband, right? And so there were some tender mercies in all of that and goodness, but it doesn't mean that I can't look back and be honest about there was a cost. And the thing about it is recognizing I was doing what was best for my family at the time, or what I thought was the best. And the reality is that's all we can do.
Right.
And
Right.
our children came to have this journey with us. And so as much as they want to fault us or blame us for whatever they didn't get, receive, whatever, in part they actually did, because they came to this family at this time for these experiences. And I truly believe that. So it's like they can be angry about it, but at some point they have to then be accountable for it too. And that's not about guilt or shame. That's just about, okay, this is just what it was. Accountability, right? I came to this family at this time and this is my life. And it's not about blame, fault, judgment. It's about none of those things. It's just accounting for the actions that happen and then saying, okay, now what am I going to do about it? And that ends up being on them as an adult, right?
That's beautiful. And if we remember that as parents, right, then it almost like for me, it relieves me of that anxiety and that
Mm-hmm.
uh, beating myself up that I mess up. I mean, I had so many years feeling like here I am in the family studies field and I love the whole fathering work that I've been involved with, but I'm not there for my kids at times and I want to be there for them, always wanting, and just letting go of that and just realizing that, this is where I'm at and doing what I'm supposed to be doing and, turn it over to God. And I really believe there's this divine, you mentioned, I love the phrase divine intervention. And I believe that God does intervene in our lives and in our children's lives in many ways. And so who knows the experiences that your children had that may have set them up for the rest of their lives. I have a couple of things I want to talk about with resiliency, if you don't mind,
Oh,
that
I'd
may
love
help to
it.
give a little light on that as well. So
We're taking notes.
So there's this lady, Emily Werner. Since your podcast is called Relentlessly Resilient, I hope that you study Emily Werner, Werner. She started this study in 1955 in the island of Kauai. Are you familiar with this?
Not one bit, I will admit.
Oh my gosh. She turned the world of psychology, at least from my perspective, upside down because she asked a different question. She said, what works instead of what isn't working and trying to find all the problems. And she was able to study this entire cohort of every child born on this island and followed them over through the years. And at 18, and then did some follow-up studies in their 20s and I think up into their 30s and followed these kids over time. And she found out that about a third of the population ended up what she called smelling like roses. And they all had come out of, alcohol. There's just a lot of abuse or problems that happen in these different families, struggles and so forth. And she found some very specific common themes that were existing in the lives of those who were what she called resilient. And resilient came out of a different field of engineering or something, right? Electricity, I think. But she used that phrase and that concept to really tap into this whole world that I just have fallen in love with about resiliency. And Norman Garmese, there's a lot of folks that have studied this, and I think the positive psychology field has come out of it as well. But the idea was, what is it that's unique about them? And, they all had at least one loving, caring adult in their life. They had a responsibility. They were involved in the family enterprise somehow. They were contributing back to the family. So there's some specific things that she found that were very unique and specific to those kids, that third of the population that came out smelling like roses. But that started the whole field of resiliency. And what we've done with the family life coaching is we have a couple of tracks, and one track that we have is called the resilience track. And so our hope is that we can help coaches help the families that they work with build resilient families over time. And if you look at resilience, and one of the things that came out of this work is looking at what are the things that help families be resilient. The simple way to look at this is you have protective factors and risk factors. And if you have more protective factors than you have risk factors, then you're going to be able to overcome the risk factors. In fact, there's this idea of looking at the ability of protective factors to inoculate you against the risk factors, the crises, the challenges that come up in life. And it doesn't mean that you're going to solve them and be a hero at overcoming your problems in life. It means that you're going to be better able. And even think about when you have a vaccine or something, right? Doesn't mean that you're not going to ever have any problems or consequences from that virus or whatever. It means, hopefully it would, but sometimes it means that you just experience it less devastatingly. It's less of a problem.
Yeah, I love this. It makes me think of a previous interview we did with a guest, Matt Patterson. He was a high school principal that talked about kind of a seesaw balancing act, same thing.
That's exactly what it is.
Like as a teacher or as an administrator or a parent even, we want to take away everything bad. We want to take away every risk factor. We want no kid to ever face anything hard. But the reality is that's not reality. So instead of focusing so much, like you said, on what's not working or what's heavy or what's dark, what if we focus more on trying to lift that up by adding more good, more light, more hope and healing on the other side? Because some of the risk factors we can't take away. Like even if I got remarried, that doesn't take away from the fact that my kid's father is dead. It might add more problems. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But what good can we add? I really appreciate that. The protective factors and the risk factors.
What are the protective factors?
So life is going to happen. You just can't avoid it, like you said. The question is, how will each of us deal with it when it comes, right? When those challenges happen. So some protective factors, like I mentioned, Emily Werner found, having a loving, caring adult if you're a child, right? Having some responsibilities, engagement with your family, you're part of the family enterprise, you're giving back some way, you have some responsibilities, you're babysitting, whatever it is. So you have some roles. That's as a child, but there's other protective factors as well. And the list is endless. You could go on forever finding education. There's so many things, maybe getting counseling if you need it. But the protective factors, the point is, I think that we can all identify and figure out what protective factors are. Living in a healthy neighborhood. I mean, having good food insecurities, right? So those protective factors you can build up. And I love that example. And we actually have some things that we share with that. We have a counseling program, and we share with our clients about this idea of the seesaw, exactly like you were saying. And so the goal is to build and stack up those protective factors on one side of the seesaw so that the risk factors, they will come, so that they are up on the upper side of that seesaw and they don't overwhelm you. And so, yeah, this inoculation thing, but so the simple equation to me is increase protective factors, decrease risk factors. It's just that simple. And simply put, if we try to inoculate or minimize the impact of those challenges we face, we get better at resolving them over time.
That's awesome. So what are some of the risk factors? I think we could probably list those, but let's list some for our audience.
Sure, but like if you're a child and you're in an abusive home or an alcoholic home, drug and alcohol is around, or if there's a lack of attention, maybe both parents are workaholics and they're never around and not available. Some of the risk factors could be the environment, the neighborhood, the education system that they're in isn't very conducive to learning, or maybe there's abuse going on. We talk about social media now and all of the bullying and stuff. There's so many factors like that. But I think some other risk factors as you grow in life too could be getting involved in some of those kind of behaviors that are unhealthy. And maybe not even eating healthy.
Right.
Eating rest.
So it really sounds like you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, at the bottom level, you got to have those basic safety and security and have food in your belly. That's right. Before you can work your way up to transcendence, right?
But also the belongingness, the love needs, the psychological needs are in there, and also self-fulfillment needs as well. But the very basic ones are, of course, food, water, warmth, and rest. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our society that are not getting that today.
That's right.
And as our housing issues increase in Utah, I don't know what we're going to do. I have a daughter right now who's a single mom, and she cannot make her monthly bills. It is impossible. What is she to do? And even low-income housing is $1,400 a month for a two-bedroom.
Oh my word!
$1,400. That's low-income,
and that's
government
right here
subsidized
on the
housing
front, on the Wasatch Front.
It's in Clearfield, Utah.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes me sick. I have
Syracuse.
Kids that,
it's horrible.
Have our grandkids, and they can't buy a house. It's just impossible. So.
Right. And my daughter was trying to buy a house, but then all of this stuff happened, and had she figured out a way or been able to be improved 4 or 5 years ago, her mortgage would be less than that rent. But now prices of houses are so high that that's impossible. And at it with high interest rates, it's becoming a problem. And the fact that our rents are going up so high, we're pushing out people and we're putting kids at risk. So my 5-year-old granddaughter has then the added stress of housing situation and food scarcity issues and stuff like that. And, of course, I do what I can, but there becomes a time where it's like, you got to figure this out, right? But it's getting harder and harder for our kids to figure it out.
Right. Well, we're so excited to support your retreat coming up. And one of the things we'll do, there's a couple of other tools we'll mention there. This ABCX model, Reuben Hill, who developed it back in the 40s. And it's powerful stuff, talking about how to deal with stressors and crises that come in life. We'll also talk about Gottman's work and his whole
I love him.
Apocalypse, the things that you can identify, but not just the problems that will predict divorce within a 90% accuracy within a year, but how to overcome that, what he calls the antidote. So we'll talk about that. But the big picture for us, I know we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but this whole family life coaching program, you can find more at familylifecoachinstitute.org. It's specifically designed to build resilient individuals, couples, and families. And you know what a BHAG is, right? A big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
My big, hairy, audacious goal is that there's a family life coach in every home. Imagine a world where every family has someone in their home who understands these basic principles of healthy communication and relationship building, healthy parenting, who knows how to incorporate the tools of resiliency to help family members navigate through life's challenges when they come. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't imagine how beautiful
What
that
a
would be to
difference.
see those families. And I think another thing you wanted, from what I understand, you wanted to get our definition of resiliency. Is that correct?
Yes.
We were just going to ask you.
We've talked about how important resilience is. Help us define it.
So to me, and I appreciate so much the work that you guys are doing, because it just really elevates it to a level that is, I think, critical in our society, that is such a need to understand and try to find ways to build resiliency and to build it in each of our lives. Even if we think we've got life licked and everything's going great, there's no reason why we can't find ways to improve the way we treat other human beings and the way we help other people. I don't think there's any question that we can grow from resiliency work. So my definition of resiliency, as I thought about this morning, is really this idea that I think that resiliency happens when we begin to accept what life has offered us. And
Oh
we
my
try to
goodness,
find
that's
ways-
so good.
and we try to find ways to turn that offering for our good. And this may be controversial, but to me, it may or may not include our family members. But we try to find ways to turn that offering for our good, and we act and adapt to improve our outcomes from what could otherwise be devastation, collapse, chaos, and myriad of undesirable and unhealthy consequences.
I love that. That is so powerful. Resilience, one of the key factors, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is to be able to state and see things for what they are. Again, not in judgment, not in shame, not in guilt,
Not
but
in should.
not in should, just the accountable version of what is happening, right? To be able to see things for what they are. And when you begin to accept what life has offered us and not be in the victim part of that offering, but to be in an empowered state, right? To say, I have the tools, skills, and abilities to conquer this, whatever is before me. I am good, loving, kind, worthy enough, and I can let go of those who don't want to be in my life, whatever it is, right? Whatever that thing is in front of you. And I think that is powerful. And I like that you included that. It may include family, it may not include family, but being able to accept what life has offered us. I certainly didn't plan to lose my husband at 49. And all my kids were leaving the house. I became an empty nester within 6 months. That was not on my life plan list. Right? So when we begin
But you adapted.
Yes.
You worked through it.
Yes. And I won't say I did it great or completely healthy. I struggled that first year or two. I was lost. I was like, I don't know how I found myself here. But the reality is, at some point you say, I've got to pick myself up. There's nobody else here to do it. I've got to do me. And I've got to make my life the best life I can make it. And in part, my journey helped me to create this podcast because I wanted to share with other people that we all have this inside of us. We all have a great source of worth. The fact that we're just here on this earth is enough to show that we are worthy and we are enough because we are here.
We're here.
And at that point, it's just in finding our purpose and moving forward with it, right? So I love that you say that resilience to you is beginning to accept what life has offered us. Doesn't mean that it's always a positive thing.
Right.
But
And then
once,
how do you turn that to good? Yeah.
right. But it is about accepting it. And some people may have great lives and they just get to have an easy time at it. But for a lot of us, and I would say predominantly most of us here, life will give us some hills to climb.
No doubt. We have 10 interns this semester, and we have interns every semester. They're amazing. Just love working with them. But we had this wonderful discussion this morning. I was telling them a little bit about the podcast and shared this definition. And it was just really interesting to hear their feedback. And I just am so much reminded by our lives and the journey that we're all taking. We're all in a different place. And I love hearing your stories, both of you, and how you've gone through your journey. And it's just interesting hearing these interns talk about some of the challenges and things they faced and what they appreciate about this resilience journey, what that means to really try to accept life and as it has. And one of them mentioned they appreciated the same thing as well, that begin to accept, because we may not be able to accept it right now, but it's a process of accepting at some point. When we do begin to accept that, then I think we can grow. I don't think we can grow and turn it to good until we can accept it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I hope that our listeners have been educated and uplifted and find some hope in what you've shared with us today. I am super excited to know that you're our VIP speaker for our Real Connections event. If you want to learn more about Joseph White and building resilient families, you can learn more at FamilyLifeCoachInstitute.org. He has a book, Why Fathers Count. Love that. If you would love to hear more from him, he's going to be our VIP speaker at our Real Connections event. You can learn more about that. It's upcoming in Salt Lake at Fort Douglas, October 11th and 12th. That's a Friday and Saturday. It is not sponsored, promoted, or connected to KSL. This is our own personal event that Jennie and I are doing in conjunction with Heather Higgins.
And we're so excited.
Of Novel Expressions. We're super excited about this. We're super excited about the relationships that we've had in the real world that we've been able to bring onto the show to share concepts of resiliency with you, our listeners. And we are super excited to be able to put on an event where we actually give you tools to walk away from the event, having a tool bag full of tools to be able to use. What could be more powerful than that? Something that we all need in this day and age.
No matter how many tools we have, we all need either more, or we need to know how to sharpen them and use them better. So
you can learn more about Real Connections at relentlesslyresilient.com.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for all of our listeners, thank you for listening in as we learn together. We hope that as you're listening, you've been uplifted, and also that maybe you've been inspired to think through an experience or a story that you can share from your life about what resilience means to you. If that's the case, you can contact us at rrpodcast@ksl.com or find us on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Relentlessly Resilient or Relentlessly Resilient Podcast. And there's a little Calendly button you can click and set up a time to talk with Michelle about what you might share about your journey with resilience. Thanks to our producer, Kellyanne Halverson, for making all the magic happen behind the scenes, and to our fabulous sponsor, Minky Couture.
And remember, whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles